It's lovely to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me down. So, as James said, I work as an education mental health practitioner. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but I am basically a wellbeing practitioner that works within schools as part of a team called the Mental Health in Schools team. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of background about who we are, how we kind of came to be, and what we do as well. So next slide, please. So an MHST, which you might hear them sort of termed as a mental health in schools team or a mental health support team, both the same thing, confusingly. Broadly speaking, are made up of a lot of EMHPs, which is what I do. So we're kind of work within schools offering sort of low intensity CBT-based interventions. And then you've got sort of a range of senior versions of myself, and then specialist mental health practitioners, which are generally speaking CBT therapists, but might also be sort of specialists in special educational needs and bits and pieces like that. You'll then have team leads, and then you'll generally have multiple kind of version or sort of multiple teams that are structured like that, that all sit underneath a clinical lead and a service manager. And so you'll have one of those within a sort of given area. So I work within the Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust. So we cover areas sort of like North Warwickshire, South Warwickshire, Coventry itself, Rugby. So it covers quite an extensive area, and you generally get around about sort of 5+ teams per area. And we're kind of in every major area across the UK. So that's kind of the basic structure of what we look like. Next slide, please. So why are we here? We know from the current data, the most up-to-date sort of research, that around about 50% of mental health difficulties manifest by the age of 14. So it's quite an early stage for them to have sort of manifested. We also know that around 1 in 5 8 to 16-year-olds had a probable mental health disorder in 2023, and that's from the ONS statistics. So it's a fair old chunk of the population of young people that have got a probable mental health condition. And we know as well that that can have a massive impact on all areas of life, including education, future employment, and life prospects as well. And it's really important to note that those with common mental health disorders in their teens are 2.5 times more likely to have a similar mental health problem at the age of 36. So really, when we're looking at kind of working with children and young people, there is a clear kind of rationale for getting it right early on so that we can have bigger impacts further down the line. And the reason that we're here, so next slide, is because of a green paper that was put together in 2017. So this is kind of like the foundation for mental health in school teams for education mental health practitioners. So it was based on the data that we already had, which has now been reinforced by sort of more up-to-date data. We realized, or the government at the time realized, that there was a need for an early intervention model. Rather than waiting until things got to kind of a higher level and then having to wait a long period of time to have higher level support, we wanted to make sure that there was a much sort of higher throughput, more easily accessible aspect of support available earlier for young people. We wanted it to, or the government wanted it to be evidence-based, which is what all of the interventions that we do are based on. And they also wanted it to be aimed at focusing on sort of a preventative approach as well. So rather than, again, waiting for things to kind of get established, working at a sort of much more preventative early intervention level. So next slide, please. So the core functions of what we do within a mental health in schools team, or an MHST, is kind of threefold. So we work giving those evidence-based interventions for mild to moderate mental health issues. So it's that early kind of aspect of them. That's our kind of bread and butter. But then the other side of what we do, which is also really, really important, is that we support the what we call a mental health lead within each education setting. So it could be schools, colleges, sixth forms. And we support them to develop their whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing. And when I say support, it means going in there, offering kind of audits to find out what they're doing well and what we can do to improve things as well, and really speaking to all the key stakeholders within that school, so students, parents, staff, and helping them to kind of develop a more appropriate and beneficial kind of systemic approach to mental health within schools. And then the third thing that we also do is sort of timely advice to school and college staff, and then also liaising with external services. So we really offer those kind of consultation slots where we're helping to direct and signpost individuals to the best sort of place for them and for their needs, and getting the right sort of support more readily accessible for them. So we kind of act as a little bit of a front door as well. So next slide, please. So the EMHP role, obviously, I might be a little bit biased, but I think it's an absolutely fab role. It works. What I do is I work directly with schools that I'm attached to. So I have currently about 7 schools that I am the sort of allocated EMHP for, and I get to do quite a varied role. So I do one side of things, which is whole school approach, which I'll talk about in a second. And the other side of things is one-to-one support with sort of low intensity CBT approaches. So if we go to the next slide. So I seem to have lost a little bit of something there, but that should basically say sort of one-to-one low intensity CBT intervention. So what we do with this is we focus on sort of short-term support. So we're not like your core CAMS level. We're not sort of your psychoanalytical level. We're working at sort of short-term support around 6 to 8 sessions that are, this says 30 to 45 minutes, although it is variable on how the sessions go, but generally speaking, sort of around 45 minutes. It establishes sort of guided self-help tools within a sort of therapeutic setting. So you're giving young people the tools and strategies that they can use in their own lives to work towards a kind of therapeutic goal. So we can work with low mood, anxiety disorders, panic, and simple phobias. And we might offer things like kind of anxiety or worry management interventions. For low mood, we might do sort of behavioral activations. That's kind of getting people going, engaging in identified valuable activities within their life, and improving that mood so that they can kind of get themselves back up to a state where they can re-engage in life in the way that they want to. As a sort of low intensity CBT practitioner, I don't offer things around sort of severe social anxiety disorders or trauma or health anxiety, but they would be stepped up to more senior practitioners within our team. So you still kind of get those really good opportunities to interact and assess people that might be having those struggles. And so you kind of get a better idea of how to sort of support them and signpost them to the right sort of areas. Next slide, please. So whole school approach is the other aspect of what I do, and I'm hugely passionate about it because it is a systemic approach to making real changes within a school. So whole school approach basically looks at these different factors here. So you've got kind of leadership and management, curriculum, teaching and learning, student voice, staff development, identifying and monitoring impact, working with parents and carers, targeted support, and a ethos and environment. And what we do is we basically look at each of those areas and support schools to sort of self-assess themselves on how they're doing on that. And then we look for data to support areas that they might be able to kind of develop in. So if you click once more on that slide, there should be something that pops up over the top of it. Fabulous. Potentially once more. There we go. So what we kind of do in this situation is we take into account all those factors there. We come together with the school to kind of develop an audit and an action plan, and that audit looks like doing focus groups, surveys, using routine outcome measures with staff, students, and parents. get a real idea of how the school's performing, and then we develop an action plan with them to see how we can kind of improve those things. We then set up awareness events. We might do workshops and training with the staff or with the students or with the parents. And we can always offer those consultations as well once we've identified students through those different awareness events and workshops and consultations, that can then lead to clinical interventions. So it's kind of, when we say whole of school approach, we really mean it's a whole school approach. We work from sort of top level all the way down, kind of in this funnel that eventually improves mental health and well-being across the board. And this is just a little bit more about the audit and action plan. So, like I said, we take into account all of those different stakeholders. We analyse the mental health provision. We gather qualitative and quantitative data, collate it into a report with recommendations, and then we collaborate with the mental health leads, that's representative within the school, in order to sort of develop an action plan. And then we implement it, and then we again do the cycle again and review how that's gone. Next slide, please. Again, as I mentioned before, the awareness events that we offer includes assemblies, coffee mornings for parents, parents' evenings, World Mental Health Days. We do loads and loads of sort of awareness side of things to really get that kind of conversation going around mental health and well-being. Next slide, please. The workshops and training that we do, although this is an exhaustive list, and it's kind of constantly under development within the teams, we offer awareness of sort of common mental health disorders, both for parents, students, and staff. Emotional regulation and awareness stuff. We work with identifying common mental health problems, understanding and supporting children with anxiety, managing exam stress, and staff wellbeing. But what's great about this is that if we identify a new need or a need that's not covered by these within the audit, then we can kind of come back to our team and say, well, let's look at how we can develop something that might target the school's needs. So again, it's quite a new service, and we're always able to kind of like look at how to kind of continue developing it. Next slide, please. So the consultations themselves follow a consultation model in most services, but not in all, which again can be a little bit confusing. But what I mean by a consultation model is basically that either a young person or staff identify some need within the young person. They're then referred internally to an in-school consultation, and then I can meet with that mental health lead or school rep to chat through that consultation before it even needs to go kind of out into a referral. And so we can kind of help to sort of signpost better that way. From that, then we can kind of work to upskill the staff and kind of get better referrals further down the line. Fab. So last slide from me on the next one, thanks. So the final picture basically is that we look for early intervention and prevention to generally kind of increase that awareness and psychoeducation of the people that we work with, whether they're staff, students, or parents. That increases access to sort of support, and then those tools for self-help. And then from that, we're able to see them sooner. We reduce that pressure, in theory, on high intensity services such as core CAMs. And by seeing them sooner as well, we reduce the chance of that continuity in adulthood, and then reduce pressures on adult services, which means that we can see them earlier, get earlier intervention and prevention sort of working faster, and generally ease pressures on mental health services across the board.